The difference between how I feel about this project right now, the day before Camp Nano, and how I felt about it the day before Nano in November is huge. So I spent pretty much all of this week alternating back and forth between prepping my mystery novel, the one I'm calling Sandstorm, even though that's not the real title, to start writing the draft for Camp NaNoWrimo, which starts Friday, which I think is going to be today when this video goes up, and also working on a course that I'm teaching for the Women's Fiction Writers Association. I posted about it in my community tab, and I will post more about that below as well. But yeah, Monday started out kind of rocky. As I said in my last vlog, I started out by going through the printed out draft backwards and making notes. I knew that the story was going to change a lot. I mean, I'm taking out a couple of characters, including one point of view that I had quite a few scenes in this point of view in that draft. So those characters are gone completely, and just a lot of things that I worked out about the ending of the book changed things throughout the draft. I knew there were going to be scenes I needed to add, scenes I needed to cut. And my goal originally was just to get like a really loose outline based on that draft with my notes in it on what needed to change. But it didn't take me long to realize as I was reading through that draft backwards that this is just such a different book now. And using that draft as a sort of outline, even with notes on it, it was not going to work. It's too messy. There are too many scenes that are just completely irrelevant or need to be changed in a very fundamental way. And honestly, looking at it was making me feel more overwhelmed about the book, like it was all out of control. Whereas in comparison, when I look at the timeline I've made and all the work I've done in that regard for the book, the story actually feels like it's very organized. So you guys know I'm an outliner. I just love structure. That's how I usually start. But I did kind of more or less pants this book for NaNoWrimo, and it's not the first time I've ever pantsed a novel. And I do find it to be really freeing and a really fun way to write. But this is what happens every time. I have an absolute mess once I'm done. I mean, a draft, and that's great because a finished draft is great no matter how terrible it is, but you know, there's so much structure that needs to be applied now. So what always helps me in this stage is just reading through my favorite parts of my favorite craft books. It's not like I haven't read them 100 times, but inevitably when I read a craft book, it'll trigger ideas for me. It'll help me take all of these scenes and the timeline and everything that's going on in my head and realize, oh, okay, that needs to go here for this beat, and that needs to go here for this beat. So I got out Anatomy of a Story, Save the Cat, and Write Your Novel from the Middle. All of these books will give you beats by different names, but more or less they're the same beats, and that's fine. It's really just hearing how each author breaks down and describes each beat that triggers new ideas for me. With Save the Cat, Save the Cat always helps me out on Act 1 and Act 3. Like, I really like the finale breakdown. It's not very helpful for me for Act 2, which is fine. I have other craft novels for that. But honestly, the biggest help with Save the Cat, the part that I always go to, is their genres. I knew from the beginning, I mean, you guys, this is a mystery novel in which the cast of characters is trapped in a house throughout the course of the novel. So, to the surprise of no one, the two Save the Cat genres that this book fits in is Whodunit and Monster in the House. And what I love about Save the Cat and their genre breakdowns is for each genre, it will give you kind of a list of ingredients, things that stories in these genres always have to get you thinking about what those ingredients might be in your story. So for Monster in the House, your three ingredients are a monster, a house, and a sin. I definitely have my monster. That was a no-brainer. I've had that worked out for a long time. Obviously I have a house. Sometimes with this genre, the house is a metaphor. In my case, it's a real house. And the sin. And the sin was interesting because in a Monster in the House story, the hero or the the way the book describes it is the prey that the monster is stalking is not entirely innocent. The sin in a Monster in the House novel is often not committed by the monster, but maybe by the protagonist or by humankind as a whole. I mean, a classic example is Frankenstein. The monster is the monster, but the sin was Dr. Frankenstein playing God when he shouldn't have been. So I only had to think about this for a few minutes before I really realized what my sin is. And I feel like, correct me if I'm wrong, but I think in most cases, if you're writing a Monster in the House book, the sin is going to be the theme of your book, if not somewhat related to the theme. So once I started thinking about my theme, I was like, oh, the sin is fill in the blank. I had it down. Okay, so then on to why done it. The ingredients for a why done it are a detective, a secret, and a dark turn. Now the detective is obvious. It's usually your main character, whether or not they're a literal detective, and my main character is my detective. The secret, I have that. Everything I've been talking about the last few vlogs on this book, how I worked through the ending so meticulously, how I discovered that my primary antagonist's motivations were not at all what I originally thought when I wrote the first version of this book. That's the secret. I know what my secret is. Great. The dark turn. This is what really gave me pause, and this is why I'm really glad I pulled this book out to read it again. And the way Save the Cat describes this as the detective's desire to solve the case grows stronger, it inevitably leads to a moment where they take a dark turn. They break their own moral code, or they go against their own ethics. They do something dark that they normally wouldn't do because of their desperation to solve the case, or just in pursuit of the secret or the truth. And I really had to think long and hard about this. This was the only one that didn't fall into place within a few minutes for me. I started thinking about my main character and looked through the draft I wrote last year, and she did not have a dark turn. She definitely didn't, and it was missing because there's a lot going on in her head. There's a lot that she has to deal with. I know her want and I know her need, and I just spent a little bit of time kind of free writing about that and tried to find an organic dark turn for her. I think I have a clue as to what that might be now, but as I'll talk about later, I don't completely have like a whole beat sheet for this book yet. So, and this is on purpose, so I don't have it like perfectly thought out yet, but vaguely I know something she's going to do and to which character she's going to do it. And it really helped me out there and helped me realize a lot of things that I need to have happen kind of in the middle of my Act 2B around the whole Dark Night of the Soul area. So then I moved on to write your novel from the middle. I really like the way this book talks about the midpoint more so than most other craft books I read. I love a good midpoint twist. I like it when the story kind of like turns sideways halfway through, and I'm really trying to do that in this book. I have a twist, I think, that is pretty good, but I love the concept even more, and I think this is more related to like the internal struggle in Write Your Novel from the Middle, where he talks about the mirror moment that happens at the middle of every story. And this is where the main character has a moment that forces them to self-reflect, and they realize the stakes are a lot higher and the bad guys are a lot closer than they thought. And they also see that if they continue pursuing their want instead of addressing their need, they are going to experience some type of death, whether it's physical death or professional or psychological death. And the book, I'm going to link all these craft books below. The book goes a lot more into the definitions of those 3 different types of death. In my case, my main character is explicitly going to see, she would experience, if she doesn't address what she needs, definitely a psychological death and very likely a physical death as well. So then you kind of like use that to address the transformation of your character. If this is what you want her to see, to figure out about herself, this moment of realization in the middle of the book, what does that mean about where she started out at the beginning of the book? And what does that mean about where you want her to be at the end of the book when she has self-actualized? And one more thing, actually, I want to go back for a second that Save the Cat helped me out with is I was reading, even though, again, the fun and games section is not very helpful to me. I've struggled with this beat in the past. I've talked about it a lot. And in fact, Lizelle Samberry has a really great video about how she handles fun and games where she gives you a lot more to work with than the Save the Cat Writes a Novel book does. So I'm going to link her video down below as well. But something that the book did say that helped me is it was just like, oh, and you know, your B story characters, here's all the traditional types of B story characters your character might have. And I knew who my main character's B story character was. And then it was like, also, you know, there are secondary B story characters. It could be this, it could be this, it could be this. And something about the way it worded that just made me realize, oh, no, this character needs to come out more in Act 2 because this is someone who I largely ignored in Act 1. They're just kind of there. But I have come to realize that they are going to play an important part in my main character's transformation at the end, and I needed to bring more of that point of view into the book as well. So the B story helped me out a lot there. Anyway, so after I read through these craft books, they all gave me a little something to work with, and I got out my note cards and I just started making a beat sheet that kind of loosely fits all of the different ways that all of these different books describe beats, and I stuck them up on my cork board. It was really fun. And I have, over the last couple of days, I've gotten to the point where now I have scenes all the way through the midpoint. And I decided to stop there because my goal for NaNoWrimo is to write 50,000 words. And when I look at these scenes and I do kind of a rough estimate of what I think the word count is going to be for half of this book, I think it's going to be 50,000 words, if not a little more. I think this is going to be a 100,000 plus word mystery, which, is not unusual for this genre, especially again, considering it's multi-POV. So I was happy stopping there. And the other reason I wanted to stop is because I did write a few bad guys close in or second half of Act 2 scenes on note cards that I saw immediately following the midpoint. And I have a general idea of All Is Lost and a general idea of the finale, of course, but it wasn't coming to me nearly as clearly as the first two acts were. And I didn't want to force the ideas out because I very strongly suspect that once I start drafting this, I mean, not just suspect, I know this. Once I start drafting this, I'm gonna figure out so much more. I'm gonna learn so much more about these characters the way they exist now. And I think that's going to, by the time I get to the point where I have half a draft, I'm gonna be able to take a little break after Camp Nano and get to work creating the beats for the second half of Act 2 and all of Act 3. And then hopefully get this thing, get a complete draft of this thing by sometime in June, which was my original goal. And so that is where things stand right now. And today that this video goes up is Friday, which means it's April 1st. Happy first day of Camp Nano. I'm gonna link my Nano profile, whatever page down below if we're not buddies yet or whatever they call it on that site. I would love to hear about your projects. Tell me all about them in the comments below, and good luck everyone. Here we go.